And good afternoon, America. I'm Ann Vandersteel, and this is Steel News Live. Today, we're going to be taking on one of the most painful, politically protected, and morally urgent issues in this country: the family court system. CPS, DCS, foster care, juvenile courts, the government machinery that claims authority over our children. I hope every parent is listening that knows this truth in their bones. There is no relationship more sacred than the bond between a parent and a child. That comes before government agencies, before courts, before paperwork, because God doesn't make mistakes, and He gave mothers and fathers the duty to protect, nurture, guide, and defend their children. Yet, across this country, families are being torn apart by systems that operate behind doors, under sealed records, with enormous power and very little accountability. Parents are told to trust the process, but what happens when the process is the problem? What happens when a protective parent is punished? What happens when a child is removed without real due process? What happens when a family court judge can change the course of a child's life with a swipe of a pen? What happens when jury instructions, sealed records, ex parte orders, and agency testimony become tools that ordinary families can't fight? And what happens when the attorneys who challenge the system become targets themselves? Today, we're joined by two women who understand this fight from different sides of the battlefield. First up, Arizona Representative Rachel Keshel joins us to discuss her legislative work on DCS reform in Arizona, including the fight around HB 4004, protective parents, due process, and accountability inside the Department of Children and Safety. Then we will be joined by Connie Reguli, a former Tennessee family law attorney whose license was suspended, not disbarred, after years of fighting CPS abuse and family court corruption. Connie has argued publicly that what happened to her was not merely a disciplinary matter, but part of a broader pattern involving retaliation, criminal charges, jury discretion, jury instructions, ballot access, and clearly the weaponization of the legal system against those who expose corruption. Today, we're asking the questions that must be asked. Are federal and state child protection agencies still necessary in their current form? Are they protecting children, or are they protecting themselves? When children are removed from loving families without due process, when parents are financially and emotionally destroyed, when attorneys are punished for defending them, when judges operate behind closed doors, are we still looking at child protection, or are we looking at a form of government-sanctioned family destruction? This is not an easy conversation, but it's not supposed to be easy, because children just aren't file numbers. They're not court orders that mom and dad have to follow. Behind every sealed hearing is a family that may never be the same again. So we're not just going to expose the problem. I'm going to be talking and asking about what must be built in its place. How do we restore the due process? How do we protect children from real abuse while also protecting innocent families from state abuse? The central question today is very simple. Who protects the children? I'm going to flip over to a quick video right now because I want you guys to get a little bit of an understanding of just how critical this whole position is.
Most people don't think about family courts as being unjust and being destructive, that there's a difference as far as in criminal courts versus family courts. Number one, you get due process, right? You don't have due process in a family court. It just doesn't exist. You have constitutional protections. You don't have constitutional protections in a family court. And you know, you can always appeal something. I guess maybe you can appeal it with a family court, but the reality is that when you appeal something, they're gonna say, well, we can't overrule the judge's discretion. It's a shame because I want to believe in the court system. I'm a person who wants to believe in the rule of law. I'm a person who wants to believe that justice is gonna be done. But I can't do it because I've seen it with my own eyes repeatedly.
Okay, I'm going to cut right over to the most important part here. Rachel Keshel. This lady is absolutely fantastic. She's currently serving in the Arizona legislature and has become a voice for reform in the area of child welfare, family rights, and DCS accountability. In Arizona, CPS functions are handled through the Department of Child Safety, known as DCS. Representative Keshel has advanced legislation focused on how the agency responds to reports of abuse, how protective parents are treated, and how the state should act when the children are truly in danger. Her work comes at a time when families across the country are asking whether child welfare agencies are operating with enough transparency, due process, and accountability. Rachel, it is an honor to have you here. Thank you so much for joining. And as always, you truly are remarkable, because it's the first fresh beacon of light I've seen in this particular subject in the Arizona State Legislature since I've been following politics in Arizona. So thank you for the important work that you're doing.
Yeah, well, thank you, Anne, for having me on. The more that we can get the word out about this, the better. I do feel like the last couple of years here in Arizona, we've gotten a lot of really good momentum going. It has spread like wildfire nationwide. And as you said, here in Arizona, way back in the early 2000s, I believe, when we had Jan Brewer as our governor, she was talking about needing to completely just burn down DCS, which was CPS at the time, and redo it. And here we are, over 20 years later, still dealing with the same issues with DCS. I had no idea how bad it was in the family courts until I was actually contacted by a family 2 years ago at this point in time by another one of my representative colleagues, Alex Culloden. He said, "Representative Keshel, you know all about DCS." Because I actually adopted 3 children out of foster care. 3 of my 5 kids were adopted from there. And he said, "Maybe you know how to deal with this." And I started talking to this family who was over $4 million that they had spent trying to fight to save their granddaughter. And I was floored by what they told me and the corruption that they were telling me that they had been through in the family courts. It was just very eye-opening. And I started to just kind of shake the beehive, so to speak, a little bit. I sent the judge on their daughter's case just a letter of inquiry. Well, it just really got things kind of heated in the family courts very quickly. I became enemy number 1 to them. And so I knew I was over the target. I am not afraid to shake things up. That's what I got elected to do. I truly believe that. And I didn't know that God was going to use me to do so in the family courts, but talk about an institution that needs it. Family courts and DCS, a lot of it's very intertwined, same issues. We are just struggling to figure out these agencies that are supposed to be, especially DCS, protecting children. That's their job.
Right.
That is what they're called to do. And seeing that the absolute opposite is happening, it was just very important to me. Once I get set on something and realize how bad it is, I have just barreled forward. I have some really wonderful colleagues who have just come alongside me to help me in this fight. Representative Lisa Fink has been one. Representative Walt Blackman has really stepped in. Representative John Gillette has been an absolute bull in a china shop this year. Unfortunately, he's not running again, but I told him he better keep helping us from the outside, because we really just need to keep moving forward and keep the fight going. And I think a lot of parents that I've met who have become friends, many of them are just dear friends of mine now, they feel like for once, this is actually going to come to a conclusion of getting something done, instead of just politicians that like to tell you they'll do something and then they don't.
Right. And I'm going to assume then that your husband is probably been one of your biggest advocates putting you forward out in all of this, because the two of you are an incredibly dynamic team in life in general. I know you support each other one way on one side or the other. With respect to the work in Arizona, though, when you first started looking into DCS system, and as being a parent who adopted 3 children yourself, was it this case you're talking about where the couple had $4 million in legal services and fees already that shocked you the most? Or was there something else that really just rocked you and you said, I've got to get more involved?
Well, I mean, that is definitely shocking. A lot of these attorneys, and it's not all, when I speak, it's not all of the attorneys, it's not all of the judges. Here in Arizona, we have a major issue with the therapist interventionists. They definitely have a racket going. There's a handful of the therapists that, they are just bankrupting families. I have met families who have had to sell their homes to pay legal fees. This is absolutely asinine to hear this from these families, and the courts and the attorneys and the officials of court appointed officials, they are just making money off of these people. And the saddest part the kids are suffering the most. That's probably the most difficult thing that I've had to stomach in this because, like I said, I've met some of these kids. I have had parents reach out to me and tell me the judge that I have on my case continues to put my children in harm's way, to put them with an abusive parent. And to me, there's no logic to that. When you start looking into some of these cases, you can't comprehend why a judge would continue to put there was a case with 4 boys. She continued to put them with this abusive father who was strangling the children. I mean, he was neglecting the children,
Mhm.
starving the children. It was pure abuse. And it got to the point where Representative Lisa Fink and myself had to finally tell her, you take them to the hospital. There was a circumstance that had happened because the head judge, and they all cover for each other. It's really sickening. But the head judge has said, well, you need to have these parents go to another, a doctor, another adult that can basically back up their claims. So she called and said her child had been strangled by the dad, marks on the neck and everything. And I said, you take those boys to the emergency room right now. You get it documented. Lisa immediately went to the mayor of the town that she lived in. We got a hold of detectives. We got a hold of prosecutors, anybody we could contact. And the judge continued, Judge Melissa Zabor continued to tell her she had to give them to the father. And we told her, absolutely not. You keep them safe. That is your priority. And by the grace of God,
Wow.
and because she had us in her corner, she was able to keep the boys, and the dad is finally being prosecuted for child abuse. But why in the world would a judge,
Wow.
and this judge, she doesn't, this is not the first time. She continues to have the same track record of putting these kids with the abusive parent. There's a case in Arizona. She's getting a lot of traction right now. Hope Hooten is her name. She would be wonderful for you to have on her show, on your show. In 2024, she had 2 kiddos, Alec, 6 years old, Lydia, 4 years old. The dad had a lot of mental problems, mental illness. He was bipolar, potentially schizophrenic. He had checked himself in for treatment, so he was admittedly struggling with his mental health issues. She was begging Judge Michael Valenzuela to not give her soon-to-be ex-husband any unsupervised visitation. And the judge just continued to not listen to this mother crying from the rooftops, to not allow this, just let's make sure he's well before he has that unsupervised time with the kids. In May of 2024, the judge allowed him to take the 2 kiddos for an overnight unsupervised visit, and he shot and killed them, 6 and 4 years old, and then shot and killed himself. And that judge sealed the records. She finally, just with the help of an amazing family court attorney here in Arizona, she just got them unsealed. And she's out there just getting her story out, she is one of the strongest women I have ever known. She has relied on God to keep moving forward, because how do you do that after a circumstance like that? But this judge is still on the bench. He is still on the bench, and the courts continue to make excuses for him and her situation, even as it's becoming nationwide, worldwide news, or a story about her. It's unbelievable.
So let's talk about HB 4004. What problem were you trying to solve with this legislation?
So many of the pieces of legislation that I ran, regarding family courts and DCS, those actually came from the moms, the dads, the parents who have gone through this. This is the people's government. Sometimes we forget that the government does belong to the people. And so when I get these wonderful bills brought to me by the parents who know best, they have lived through the hell of DCS and family court. They know exactly what loopholes need fixed, what holes, period, need fixed. And so that was actually a bill brought to me by a mom who went through a just tragedy herself in the family courts many years ago. She was a domestic violence victim, and she finally got a good judge and a good attorney to help her get out of that and to protect her kids who were also being abused. So she's now a supervisor. Talk about infiltrating. She decided, I'm going to actually infiltrate the system that needs fixed and even get on the inside and figure out what more we can do. So she brought me a lot of the legislation I ran this year. I think she should run herself. She's amazing. Her name is Tanya. And she was the one behind that bill, because what's happening is DCS, when they get involved with these cases, a lot of times the safe parent calls DCS because the children are either divulging information of abuse that happened when they were with the other parent, or they come to the home with marks on their body, whatever the case might be. So the safe parent calls DCS, and DCS is like, well, I can't really do anything right now. They're with the safe parent. So the DCS is kind of, and it's the same with, we have noticed with law enforcement, when they try to get law enforcement involved, a lot of times these agencies are like, nope, domestic dispute, I want nothing to do with that. So they're just avoiding it. So these parents who are trying to protect their kids from more harm are just stuck having to follow a court order, give the kids back to the unsafe parent. And so I have tried to go to DCS and say, this isn't working. We have got to figure it out. I do think we're making some ground with DCS in Arizona. John Gillette, Representative Gillette, has been just integral for that. I mean, he has really put the pressure on the government committee, myself, John, Representative Walt Blackman, and Representative Lisa Fink. This was probably one of the best committees I've been on in the legislature, because everybody on that committee was ready to actually make some changes. Like I said, changes that are decades in the making here that usually just get shoved under the rug. So we're going to continue that next session. I'm in a pretty tough race, but Lisa Fink and Walt Blackman will absolutely be back. And I always tell people, even if I don't get reelected, I'm not done fighting. I can probably do more damage in a good way from the outside, because I don't have to mind my P's and Q's as much as citizen Rachel. So I'm not going anywhere. It doesn't matter what this election holds coming up. I will still be around fighting to help these parents. Like I said, many have become dear friends of mine. And I've seen the pain on their children's faces. I have 5 kids of my own. The mama bear in you comes out, and you want to just get this fixed, because this is unacceptable, what is happening to these families.
It's 100% unacceptable. So how do we protect children from real abuse while also protecting innocent parents from false allegations or what I would call government overreach?
Oh, well, that is a very good point, because it definitely goes the other way. I have learned in this process, I have met thousands of parents, whether it be in person. We had the ad hoc committee hearings that we held. It's crazy. It's almost been a year ago now. And I have met parents that, I heard their side of the story, but then when you come to find out more, there's a little bit more to the story. So you kind of learn you have to be very discerning in these situations, unfortunately. But that is we had some legislation to actually help do that, because some of the parents that have made these false allegations, there is plenty of that too. And then you have an innocent parent having to combat that. So we had some pieces of legislation that would have actually, made it a criminal offense to do so if you were making false allegations against the other parent. And though, unfortunately, those pieces of legislation just kind of died. A lot of what we did in the House just stopped moving in the Senate. The bill that you talked about, 4004, unfortunately, we got that in a little bit late in the game, once the committees were coming to a close and things like that. So that's a bill that will definitely be dropping very early next session, whether it's me sponsoring it or Lisa Fink or someone else. We want to get that one in. It's a great piece of legislation. It's actually a piece of legislation I think we can get a governor's signature on, especially if we have Andy Biggs in there. We can get a bunch of governor signatures, unlike 450 plus vetoes by Katie Hobbs. But Yeah, so
Well,
there are
she's in a little
still
bit of trouble right now. Just a
yeah,
little bit.
well, just a little bit. It's always one thing
Yeah.
after the other with her, so.
Do you think parents fully understand, Rachel, their rights when DCS first comes to the door? And should parents be required to speak to DCS without counsel present?
Nope. And that is one of the biggest issues that we have is DCS is supposed to hand them their rights. There is a packet that DCS has. It
Mhm.
has everything written out. And how many parents do you think receive that information when DCS shows up at their door?
0?
Absolutely zero. Correct.
Yeah.
And so we have been trying to inform parents as well. You do not have to let them in your home. Record everything. Record everything. A lot of the times when the caseworkers come, if parents kind of know what to do more, they pull out their phone, start to record, and that really throws the caseworkers for a loop. They're not used to that. They are used to being able to just trample all over parents' rights. That is one of the biggest issues we have with both DCS and within the family courts. The video that you
Mhm.
showed at the beginning of this I could not have said it better. There is no due process for these parents. There is
Right.
no their constitutional rights, both the parents and the children are just being trampled on constantly in these situations. And I think we saw too during COVID in 2020, most Americans don't understand what their rights are. I mean, they really don't. They just let the government come in and trample upon them all the time. So it's no different with these parents in these situations. And so I don't know how we best inform them, but we need to. And it would really help with a lot of these terrible circumstances that you end up hearing about.
Well,
Yeah, I mean,
I mean,
people I know have gone through this. So,
so our organization has written legislation. We've shared it in this group that you're in as well.
mhm,
Frankly, we need teeth. If it's written into the legislation that they're supposed to receive a clear written statement of rights before speaking with DCS, right? They should understand that, and they're not getting it. There should be penalties for that, including up to job termination from the person who's, antagonizing the family. I want to shift gears because we only have a few minutes left in this segment with you, and it's really important because you know what it's like to have three children that you've adopted from foster care. Many families believe that foster care system actually has financial incentives that can reward removal instead of reunification. What have
yep.
you seen in Arizona?
Well, I will tell you when I felt called to adopt kiddos, I felt very clearly that God had a child for me, and it ended up being 3. So that was a little bit of a surprise, but I did not understand the system very much. I just knew that we were filling a calling, we took the calling, and we ended up with 3 kiddos who stayed. They all stayed, all 3 of our foster kids. But I will tell you something that was a red flag to me. My daughter, Lily, she's now 13. When she came, she was 3, and her mom was struggling with addiction. Both of her parents were. It was a very commonplace story in that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling you, I worked so hard to get her back with her mom. Now, we loved this little girl. She is amazing. She is just an amazing kiddo to this day. But I knew, ultimately that's her mom. I'm
Right.
bonus mom is what we've always called me because we still have a relationship with her. But as far as Lily went, I drove her mom to rehab to get better. She was ready to get well and took her up there because the caseworker had failed to do something with an appointment schedule. They turned this drug addict with her bags packed away. And she was so
Oh,
defeated when I dropped her off. After that, that was it. That was when she just
that's
gave up.
terrible.
And
That's
so
terrible.
I realized at the time something is weird here. And Lily, we have a really awesome relationship with her paternal grandma as well. She comes to our family, holidays. We are great friends. And she couldn't get custody. You look at like kinship, and Lisa Fink has a bill for that as well. But it's
Great.
the incentives. They get more money to place them with non-kinship placements where kids thrive in
So
kinship placements.
Right. So to my point, then, I mean, this is a little bit of a rhetorical question based on that statement, but should the state be required to exhaust safe family placement options before placing a child with a stranger?
Absolutely. And that's the legislation that Lisa Fink has run now 2 sessions in a row. And I will tell you, there was a Republican that killed it. last session, who used to be a DCS caseworker.
Interesting.
You look at this, and that's because the legislators who have the lobbyists in their ear, whether it's the court lobbyists, which should be completely illegal. It is unethical to have one branch of government coming into our legislature, lobbying legislators against good court reform bills, but that happens. And then the lobbyists for DCS come in and get in people's ears as well. So
Okay.
those are the battles we have, but we know what they are now. We've tried to make it where the court lobbyists are not welcome in the House. Some of our Republican colleagues, oh, that's not very nice. So it's that squishy, too nice Republican stuff. But
Right.
I mean, we have to figure out how to make this where we can move forward and get good legislation passed to help these families and these kids.
Should there be independent audits of DCS removals, placements, reunifications, or any adoption outcome?
Oh, absolutely. And we've been looking into that. As far as DCS, John Gillette has really had the pressure on them. We were finding out that hospitals, specifically Phoenix Children's Hospital, was being incentivized to report abuse. So what was happening was, I met a young couple who had a child with the fragile bone syndrome, or whatever you call that disorder. And they lost both of their children because of those incentives, because the hospital, instead of really looking into this, really listening to the parents, doing extensive testing and things like that, they were getting close to $1,000 to just report abuse to DCS, and then DCS moves in, takes kids out of safe homes. We cannot be incentivizing that type of stuff. They need to be
No.
reporting abuse for the sake of the children, not
In,
money.
in your opinion, are agencies like DCS fixable?
Well, I mean, I think we just need a redo, honestly. I mean, this is not working. We've got to figure out how to start from square one. And if you're going to call yourself, Child Protective Services or the Division of Child Safety, you better be protecting kids. And that is not happening. The kids are coming in last all the time in this
What would
agency.
what would a child welfare system look like if it were built around children, parents, due process, and the truth?
Oh my goodness, it would be a totally different thing. It would be serving its proper purpose and serving the people and protecting the kids like it's supposed to do.
What about reform? What should every state legislature in America be doing right now to investigate and reform these agencies?
You have to start by calling them out, and you have to be relentless. When you shake it up in the legislature, I will tell you right now, you take a lot of slings and arrows. You cannot be spineless with this. They do try to scare you. They come after you in different ways. It has happened to me, but you have to continue moving forward. If they're doing that, that means you're over the target, as I said
Right.
before. So we just need more people. I really felt like, especially this last year, a lot of the momentum that we have in Arizona came from a group of legislators willing to step up and say, you do what you want to me, but we're going to get this fixed. And it was to
Right.
the point where we had the director of DCS in Arizona helping us and in the backgrounds and letting us know this is really what's going on. And what we came to find out that was very interesting, a lot of these agencies, Department of Economic Security, DCS, DHS, they've kind of made the system where they can all use each other as scapegoats, the way that some of their rules and regulations are working together. So we realized when we went to the director, she said, yeah, but my hands are tied because of DES does this, like the incentivizing the
Right.
hospitals. Oh, but then the hospitals say, but DHS doesn't allow me to do that. So it's almost like they've created this terrible, I don't know what hierarchy of these agencies where they can all throw each other under the bus and then nobody is accountable. And that's the biggest
Yeah,
problem, as you know, and a lot of what's going on right now in government, period. There's
that's
just
right.
no accountability. And the people are sick of it because that's always the excuse.
Yeah. Well, Rachel, I certainly appreciate you coming on today, for the courage you have and for bringing this issue right into the belly of the beast in the legislative arena, because the protection of children, the rights of parents, This is not a partisan issue. This is fundamental and foundational to our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and our God-given freedoms to be here on earth, walk around, breathe air, and raise our families. So I think you've done an amazing job of showing our audience what the legislative fight looks like. But we're going to move now into the courtroom and the legal system itself with our next guest. And if you want to stick around in the green room and watch it live, that's great. Or you can tune in on Rumble, YouTube, X, Facebook, LinkedIn. We're all over the place right now because this is such an important subject. We've got Connie Reguli, who has seen firsthand what can happen when attorneys and advocates challenge this machine. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Okay. Wow. Incredible. Just an incredible woman. What Representative Keshel just laid out is the legislative side of this fight, the policy, the statutes, the agency, the procedures, and the urgent, and you heard it, it needs an overhaul, urgent need for oversight and overhaul. But we got to move into the courtroom now, because for many families, the real trauma begins once a case enters the family court or juvenile court. This is where parents often say they lose their voice. This is where evidence goes poof into thin air. It just doesn't show up, or they don't allow it. This is where hearings are sealed. You don't get a jury of your peers. This is where attorneys are afraid to challenge judges, agencies, guardians ad litem, and court-appointed players. This is where children can be taken, placed, medicated, moved, adopted out, or alienated from their own families. And frankly, this is where the attorneys who challenge the system, like our own attorney at American Made Action, Christopher Burns, can become targets themselves. Our next guest knows this terrain intimately, and we'll be right back with Connie Reguli after this quick break.
Food security or food sovereignty. Every time we buy food, we choose. Glyphosate exposure is exploding, and people are asking, why is food so expensive? This is why we do what we do. Organic fields, thriving orchards, the purest ingredients straight from the earth. From our farms to your family, we do the testing so you don't have to. You save time, you save money, and our regenerative farms continue to grow. It's time to remove what does not belong. Rebuild with cleaner inputs. Support the farmers with the future in mind. This isn't a trend. It's a shift. We still have a voice. We still have a choice to vote with our dollars for a healthier America today. Tap the link.
Are you ready to take your health back? At vandersteelhealth.com, I trust Purium's powerful superfoods to fuel my body with clean, plant-based nutrition. And in a world filled with toxins, Biomedic is designed to help support your body's natural detox process, even from glyphosate exposure. Real nutrition, targeted support, no junk. Go to vandersteelhealth.com and take control of your health today. And welcome back. Connie Reguli spent years as a family law attorney in Tennessee fighting for parents and children. She became one of the most outspoken critics of CPS overreach and family court corruption. Her law license was suspended, not disbarred, and that distinction matters. Connie has argued that suspension, criminal prosecution, and surrounding legal actions were part of a broader pattern of retaliation for exposing DCS and family court abuse. She has also raised serious questions and concerns about judicial discretion, jury instructions, ballot access, and whether the courts can effectively rewrite the rules after the fact. Connie Reguli, joins me now. Connie, it is great to have you here. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview, because you are the whale out there in terms of the big kahuna of people who have been around the block in this industry of child trafficking through the court system for decades, and you have paid the price. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come over here. You are a former Tennessee family law attorney and a longtime advocate for families caught in the CPS and family court system. Welcome to Steel News.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you. Thank you so much for being, taking the position that you're going to be the voice. I'm almost embarrassed to say that I've been working on this for 30 years because you just feel like you are just treading water. You're in a swamp, you're in a sand pit, and you can't get past it. And I decided long ago that until the voice is loud and clear, until people are talking out loud every day, because I've seen it since 1997. So Thank you. And I listened to your last guest. She's right on target with everything. But let me tell you this, here is the word: children are hostages. The children are hostages. These children have done nothing wrong, and yet they're being held hostage, and everybody makes money off the child once you are holding it hostage.
It's sickening. It's absolutely sickening. But I want to first start because I think we need to correct the record. Your law license was suspended, not disbarred. What is the difference, and why does that distinction matter?
Well, actually, I'm kind of in purgatory right now because I have 4 cases pending in the Tennessee Supreme Court to clear up the matters that they suspended me on. They suspended me on a fake crime. The crime has been reversed. I have no crimes anymore. I'm not a felon. I have no criminal record, and yet they will not give me my license back. And there are other cases. And what they have done is just held them and not decided. And I know every single person who's been through the family court system can have some empathy and understanding for that, because so many people face the same thing. But I'm in just this permanent suspension right now, and they won't hear it. I could get into some of the legal reasons as to why they're having difficulty with the challenges, because I've challenged them at every level. I've challenged them on the procedural issues, the substantive issues, recent cases that came out from the United States Supreme Court on administrative law. And that would be actually a whole podcast that we might want to talk about sometime.
Well, we can get into that sometime, but I want to kind of stay narrowly focused because I want to talk about your primary fight today. Is your main mission to restore your law license, or is it your main mission to protect children and expose what's happening in CPS and family court?
My mission is no longer to get my law license back. They stole my practice. I could never rebuild the practice that I built over 30 years. I'm almost 74 years old, but my emphasis and what I do every day is to try to restore the rights for children and families. And I do it. I still get people. I'm very active on social media. Parents call me every day. I talk to them. I encourage them. I consult with them. I give them ideas on how to proceed. And more importantly, I also work at the legislative level a lot.
Yes, that I'm quite aware, because we've consulted with you on several things, and you're tracking what we're doing as well, which is very exciting. And more of that will get revealed as American Made Foundation and American Made Action start to really come forward with what we've been doing, a lot of work behind the scenes. And we're very excited about how far we've come. Bringing it back to you, when did you learn about the relationship? When did you fully comprehend what was going on between CPS, family court, juvenile court, court-appointed attorneys, these guardian ad litems, and the judges? Talk to us about that whole system, if you will.
Yeah. So, I mean, actually, the signs were there very early. And for people who know some of the history of the legislation, they understand ASFA, which is the Adoption and Safe Families Act. It passed it in 1997. And law was a second career for me, and I started in 1994. And so, to be very honest, when I first saw ASFA happen, I thought it might be a good idea, because children were literally lost in the system. Like DCS, CPS didn't even know where they were. We had no desktop computers. We had no smartphones. They were file folders in somebody's desk drawer, and they didn't know where they were. I worked with families and I saw weird decisions. I saw decisions where they just weren't making good choices and decisions. So I knew pretty early on.
Sorry.
That's okay.
My computer froze, or yours did, so I apologize. So, when you look back at the Clinton legislation, essentially, this to me, and Maureen and I have talked about it, my colleague at American Made Foundation, we have talked specifically about that was really one of the turning point for monetizing the destruction of families and ensuring that reunification was never the goal. How would you break down the monetization aspect of the Adoption and Safe Families Act that was, pushed through by the Hildebeest and her co-conspirator Bill?
Yeah, in 1997, and like I said, at the moment, I thought it might be a good idea. But what happened, I actually call it the secret middle class welfare program, because once a child is adopted, they continue to get the funding. They continue to get per diem funding, which is still taxpayer money. We're getting state dollars and federal dollars, but it's still your dollars. And so what has happened is they decided that it was more beneficial and more financially functional to move children from foster care to adoption instead of restoring the families or placing them with relatives. And that is what we've ended up with. And when they first did it, they had a income cap on it. So they would only do it for poor children. But in 2008, they removed the income cap. So every child who went into foster care was available for the adoption bonus money. And I have access to the Tennessee checkbook. I've gone through the Tennessee checkbook and looked at when there were big shifts. And you can see when it went from $3 million a month just for the state of Tennessee, which is still a lot, but it jumped all the way up to $12 million a month. So for the adoption bonus money, just for this state, which is, we're kind of an average state. So multiply that times 50 plus, we have this secret welfare program that is funding adoption instead of restoring and helping families.
Yeah, it is a money laundering machine, and the amount of money that flies literally under the radar, many times in brown paper bags and PayPal and Zelle transactions, is staggering. You wrote at one point that a judge can take your money, your children, your home, your freedom with a swipe of a pen. That is a really powerful statement. I mean, it's daunting when you think about that. How often does that happen in family court when a family is brought in under the concern or guise of a child is in harm's way?
All the time. I mean, the judges have so much power. But here's an
Do the
interesting.
families understand it though, Connie? I mean, do the families get that the judge have all the power in the courtroom?
Most people who still walk in a courtroom who've never had an experience in the courtroom before believe that judges will be fair, impartial, and it will be a tribunal of justice. Most of them still believe that. And that's not what happens. But here's an interesting twist when it comes to I'm going to call it DCS, CPS. I'll just call it CPS because it's CPS everywhere. When a child is put in state's custody under CPS, they have total control. Once they get their hands on that kid through an ex parte order where there's no due process, they're in total control and they can flip that child to as many different homes and placements as they want. And this is something that is in such contrast to two parents who are fighting over custody. The judge can only award custody to one parent or the other. But when the judge puts the child in the custody of DCS, and I'll give you an example. We had an autistic 6-year-old child removed last year. In 100 days, he was in 20 different homes in 100 days for an autistic child. And I just got a phone call from another family. They have a 7-year-old African-American male child who was making A's in school, and they have flipped him to 8 different placements in 6 weeks. What does that do to a child? And DCS is in total control, and the judge can't do anything about it.
So, I mean, those stories that are horrific. If a parent is listening to this and they hear that their a child is being moved that many times, parents know that a lot of times children have attachment disorders. When you leave just to go out to dinner and get a babysitter, they act up and they're crying and hysterical because they're so attached for whatever reasons, love or otherwise. When you move a child that much, the long-term outcome studies of these children raised like that, what does that look like for that child becoming an adult?
Well, we know that attachment disorder is real now. I mean, we know that. And unfortunately, there have been some long-term studies of foster care. Unfortunately, there's not enough. But there are statistics out there to show that if you've been a foster child, you are more likely to be in prison. You're more likely to not have a job. You're more likely to not go to college. You're more likely to have your own children taken, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
All the markers are bad. All the social markers are bad.
So, as a family court judge, do you think that they're being held to constitutional standards? And what checks actually exist when a judge gets it wrong? Are there any checks at all?
Well, no, because judges have immunity, so you really can't sue them. But here's what we have to look at seriously. There's a leadership problem. Okay. There is a leadership problem. I was listening to your last guest talking about DCS, CPS working with them now, which she also said, she kind of said in the same breath that the CPS commissioner was also trying to give them feedback and resistance by saying, oh, not us, somebody else. There's a leadership problems and there's a money problem. So as long as we are funding the wrong thing, we're going to get the wrong results. So, and the judges there's a lot of bad judges. There was a very bad judge who came after me, but the judges are also caught up in this system.
Yeah.
That CPS comes in with an ex parte order and puts in a sworn petition that the child is in imminent danger. So what is a judge to do?
What evidence? What evidence do they have in this sworn testimony?
They have very little evidence. They have hearsay, but they put that in something and they tell this judge under sworn affidavit, this child's in imminent harm and imminent danger. So you have to kind of say to yourself, what is a judge to do? A very, very good judge would force them to give them some additional information. But a lot of judges are like, hey, what if I don't remove this child and something happens tonight? Right? Because they're just not conveying good information. So it really is the leadership of these agencies and then how it flows downstream all the way down to the caseworkers and the investigators as to how they are operating.
All right. So let's use an example here. This was on your Facebook page. What happened here?
I am so traumatized by this that I had a nightmare about that picture last night, and I'm still going to have more. I am looking for the biological mother. If anybody sees that in Clarksville, please find that biological mother. It was reported in the newspaper yesterday in an Amber Alert that a 3-year-old foster child was missing. And then the next thing we know, they're pulling him out of the attic. And my first question was, how did he get in the attic? This is a foster home. This is where the child is supposed to receive heightened protection. The trauma for that child to be put in an attic, left in an attic, and then be pulled out by law enforcement. My breath is taken away. I don't even know what to say anymore.
Yeah, but I mean, that is a PG quote picture that we can put on the internet with this show and that I would present personally. There's far worse things that go on in foster care. And we've talked about this on various podcasts. In 2019, I'm sure you know where I'm going with this, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo in Trump administration 1, they published their Secretary of State yearly trafficking in persons report. And that report singularly focused in the United States on the foster care system as being the #1 place for child predators to target, to grab these children and do unspeakable things with them. So that little example that just broke yesterday, it was on your Facebook page, is mild in comparison to what's going on with these children. So walk us through, now that this child is found in this foster care home, what should the lawful response be in this situation?
Again, I'm going to find that mother. I'm going to find her. I'm going to find out why that child was removed and why he wasn't safely placed with relatives. The fact that will a judge do anything? I don't know. There should be a special investigation, but you know what? The 2025 audit of CPS in Tennessee said that they did not complete their SIU investigations, which are their special investigative unit, which is to cover foster parents, teachers, anybody who has the care of children. Their history shows that they will do nothing. I have pictures in my possession worse than that in Tennessee foster care. I have a 10-year-old little girl in her underwear, locked in her room, crying out that she did not want to go to bed at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I have a video of a gender confused little foster girl who is being wrestled to the floor by a foster father who is grinning about it. I have foster children who have bruises on them, and I can't put all of them out there because of the way I got those pictures. And
Right.
people are shut down and they're told they can't share anything because it's confidential. I just had a news story put out on Fox 17 News. I have a great relationship with a reporter here, and it was on young Matthew, who was the autistic child who was in 20 places in 100 days. The judge chewed her out when he found out it was on the news. I've had a news broadcast in Perry County. Perry County judge chewed out the parents when he found out he took their story to the news. I mean, these are the parents' real stories, and to put them in those positions is outrageous.
So you're talking about getting chewed out, but are parents and attorneys like yourself being criminalized for resisting or challenging DCS orders, judges in the courtroom? What's happening here? Because like you said, parents walk in thinking there still is a real judicial system that's going to be fair. They're going to get a real fair tribunal. But there is no jury of your peers in family court. The juvenile system has sealed cases. And a lot of times parents are not allowed to present the exculpatory evidence, which would prove that they are not the felon, the judge and the DCS is making them out to be. So, I mean, how do we resist this? How do the parents get around from being criminalized?
Well, and yeah, well, it's very, very difficult. I was criminalized because I stood
Right.
up and resisted an ex parte order that I felt like was not valid and was not. And I had contacted CPS and said, let me work with you in this investigation. We'll be happy to show up. You can see the child. You can talk to the mother. I just want her to have an attorney present. I left messages for everybody, and instead they went and got a secret ex parte order to take the child anyway, and I resisted. And, you know, and let me tell you something again about money in the court system. Let me tell you of an example. So this little child who is 7 years old, African-American male child, he was fine. His mother had an episode. She ended up in the hospital, but she is not a addict. She works. She has a home. She takes care of her child. And because she had to go to the hospital for just 24 hours, they took her child. He has been his level. What they do is they ramp up their levels. He is what is called a level 3 continuum. That is $273 a day. That is $8,000 a month for a level 3 continuum child. Every single month, that foster parent is making $8,000 tax-free money, gets free medical for the child. And the attorney, if the parent gets a court-appointed attorney in Tennessee, that attorney can only make $60 an hour and is capped out at $1,500. And so how much time do you believe that a court-appointed attorney is going to put into a case? Who's making the money on the child? And you also had, and I heard your prior guest talk about the therapist, they're in on it. They get money. All the additional services get money. They have transportation people for the children. They get money. The child is the hostage, and everybody can make money on the hostage.
Absolutely. And that is, in fact, the case in point of what's going on. That's what the Adoption and Safe Families Act really, I think, put into overdrive when they really started to fund through the Social Security Administration, which falls under Bobby Kennedy at Health and Human Services. SSA's Title IV-E, Title IV-D funding is a behemoth and a whale of money that comes filtering into all 50 states. And you and I have talked about this. How do we reduce the amount of children that are wrongfully taken without true exigent circumstances and real well-documented harm? If you can't prove those things, there's no reason someone should come and take your child at all. The harm that if you've just documented is immense to the child when they're bounced around to all these different foster homes, or worse, stuffed in attics or trafficked for sex trafficking, et cetera. So, we've discussed, Connie, how do we reduce this? We know that on average, about 95% of the children in the system clearly didn't have a real valid reason to be in the system. And that money that's coming down from the federal government is fostering the development of making sure that system is full of children at all given times to fund all the parasitic organizations. So if we had legislation that raised the threshold and evidence that you needed to bring to the table in order to take a child, do you believe that we could eliminate 95% of the cases, therefore not requiring all that money out of Washington, D.C., which is your money, my money, it's taxpayer money? Could we reduce the, could we defang and defund with proper legislation?
So as long as you are funding the wrong work, you're going to get the wrong result.
Right.
These levels of evidence, and you're talking to somebody who's been in the courtroom who is a vigorous litigator. The levels of evidence, whether it's preponderance of the evidence, whether it's clear and convincing, whether it's beyond a reasonable doubt, when a judge is making that decision, it is subjective. Okay. It is subjective. The judges can decide it's clear and convincing evidence. The judge can decide if it's beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not a jury making those decisions, but are juries good? No, a jury convicted me on a false crime, a fake crime. And how were they able to do it? Because the people in the judiciary manipulated the law. So let me tell you three things that that have kind of happened, and we're trying to work on them, make them better. First of all, the executive order that Trump signed on November 25th, 2025. I think it's called Fostering the Future, which I don't like ever when they use the word foster. But it does say in that first paragraph of that executive order that the policy of the administration is to build stronger families and reduce unnecessary removals. So we do have the executive order behind us. I reached out to Alex Adams, and I'll tell you how I talked to him briefly here, but I reached out to Alex Adams and I said, you need to do a technical bulletin that supports what this executive order says to do, and you need to be specific. Secondly, is through the Family Forward Project, we got a bill introduced in Congress called the Advocates for Families Act. We need support to get that bill passed. What that bill does is says that a family is able to have an advocate with them throughout the proceeding. And this is to build an advocacy and mostly volunteer program, kind of similar to the CASA program, but for families. The third thing is when you talked about HHS, and I know we're winding up here, but I want to get this in. I am working with MAHA. And so I went to Washington, D.C. in May on a MAHA roundtable about psychotropic medication and foster children. And so we had an all-day discussion about it. They do know how serious it is. And at that meeting, Alex Adams, who is now the head of ACF, was present. And I wiggled my way up to talk to him like I like to do. And I told him he needed to be very specific in an executive order and a technical guide on what the states needed to do. And he says, have you drafted it? And I said, yes. And I sent that to them. And I have begun that conversation. We have problems with the laws. We've got to look at what can we do with leadership. We have an executive order. We can get a technical bulletin. We can get it produced. We can get it enforced and promoted at the state level.
This is such music to our ears that you've made the connection into the ACF up in DC, and that you've already drafted the order and you've sent it. I mean, this is to me hope. That brings hope to this whole conversation. Because while we saw what the White House put forward with it, okay, that's great. It's the first step. They're walking through the gate. They're trying to, but again, they're acknowledging a system and they're trying to fortify it. And I guess the question that many of us have here is, are federal or state CPS agencies even needed at this point?
Well, my theory is we need to bust it apart. You can't call any agency services and have them in the business of prosecuting. I was a prosecutor as well. Right. Ultimately, we need two separate agencies. We need an agency to serve children and families with what they need, because we know 80% of these children are removed under neglect and substance abuse issues with the parents. That needs to be an agency totally focused on that, totally focused on relative and kinship placement and support. And then we need a prosecutorial agency like a district attorney, who are punishing crimes. The children who have been truly traumatized with abuse don't need to be in a foster home. They need to be in a trauma center.
So
They need,
if a child's being abused, then Connie, who should respond?
well, they need to be in a trauma center. They need to be a
But I mean,
place
in
where
order to get them to the trauma center, if the child is being abused, who has to respond? Is it, how does that work? How do we get them to the trauma center?
cops, just like if somebody's in a motor vehicle accident, or if there's a murder or there's a shooting, the cops show up and they call the ambulance.
Okay.
So we need to get them in from the scene of the abuse. We need to put them in a trauma focused environment where there are professionals that, if there are good family members, that they can come in and begin to work with the children through a trauma setting.
Okay. Should anonymous reporting be allowed?
No, no, no. We shouldn't even have confidential reporting. People are entitled to face their accusers in criminal court. They should be able
There
to
you go.
face their accusers in CPS court because it is quasi-criminal.
So you're saying basically false reporters should face criminal and civil penalties.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
What about
and there,
CPS
and there
workers?
should be no immunity. I'm fighting cases now.
Great.
And because there's immunity, and I've taken civil rights cases up to the Sixth Circuit. We need to get rid of their immunity as well.
All right. So here's the $24,000 or $64,000 question for those that remember that show. If you had the authority to redesign the system tomorrow, what are the first three things that you would do?
Well, first of all, we would have to set up two separate agencies. We have to have two separate agencies. I think the state localized Bureau of Investigation, such as the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, needs to have a specialized unit on child abuse and sexual abuse so that you have specialized prosecutors and you have specialized trauma intervention fields and professionals and places to do that. And then we need to have assessments to help and support families. They have got to be two separate agencies. This is going to make a lot of people very upset. We are going to have to restructure funding more like a block grant funding specifically designed to meet the needs. Substance abuse is horrible. We've got to look at substance abuse. 1/3 of kids are removed because of substance abuse of the parents. And that can be anything from smoking pot on the weekends to serious, debilitating, daily meth use. So we've got to have proper assessments, and we've got to build and support families and kinship.
All right. Well, Connie, I know we're getting a little bit short on time, and I have probably 100 more questions that I want to go through with you. Your expertise, your knowledge base is pretty much, I would have to say, unmatched anywhere that I've seen on the internet, looking for experts, people who've been on both sides, and you are a rare find. So if you were going to eliminate financial incentives tied to removal, foster placement, and adoption, how would you redirect any funds, or would you really turn it back into the immediate families and then, of course, the immediate community, organizations, churches, and so on and so forth, to kind of rally around and pull this together? Because in my humble estimation in the past was we didn't have these agencies, and churches and family members were sort of the go-to points when families fell under distress, real distress, not the manufactured kind coming out of DCS.
Yeah. Well, CAPTA has expired. The original CAPTA bill has expired, which is a great opportunity for us. They're continuing to fund it through what they call continued resolutions, but that happened in September 2023. They tried to reauthorize it, and I attribute the failure to reauthorize it to people like the Family Forward Project and other groups who've been talking to legislators and says, no, it's broken. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. So we have a great opportunity in front of us, but I think part of the funding is going to have to be in a block grant funding, much like TANF, temporary assistance to needy families. And although the states are horrible managers of their TANF funds, and we're going to have to look at how we manage those types of federal funds, that's where, and then look at the different segments we have. We have SNAP benefits, which come through the Department of Agriculture. We have TANF, which comes through another department. And then we have Title IV funds, which come through HHS. So somebody needs to globally look at how this system works, because it's all about restoring families and get families what they need. And children, what do children need?
That's exactly right. Some advice before you go. What should parents do the moment DCS or CPS appears at their door?
Yeah, so I was listening to your last guest too, and I differ with them just a little bit because if DCS comes to your door and you send them away immediately and say, go get a warrant, they will get a warrant and they will take your child. So I say, I do record, I do say record, record, document, document, ask names, ask for identification, ask who these people are, and then also cooperate with boundaries. And so if
Mhm.
DCS comes with your door and say, we have a referral, you say, okay, fine. I'm willing to work with you. I want to alleviate your concerns. My children are safe. So let's talk about it, right? Like, and they can say, look, I don't really want you in my home, but I will come and meet with you tomorrow at your office, right?
Okay.
Or I will call an attorney and we will call you back. So I say cooperate with boundaries. And we have done that in Tennessee with advocates, and it has shaken up the system. We had a mom in East Tennessee. They'd removed several children. She was pregnant. She was going to have a baby. We wanted to do everything we could to keep that family in place and keep that baby home. And when DCS called her, she called us, and we intervened by being present in the whole process, and it shut the whole case down.
Fantastic. And word to your fellow attorneys, how can they protect themselves while still zealously defending parents in this process?
Wait, you can't. You can't. You can't. I mean, that's the
Okay.
bottom line. You can't, and they don't. So that's where we are, and that's something we need to fix.
There's so much that we need to fix, Connie, but we're taking bites of the elephant one at a time. You can't take the beast down all with one shot. It's going to take many hands to make that light work. And Connie Reguli, you really are absolutely incredible at what you've managed to do. Your courage, your testimony, your willingness to continue to speak out despite the cost. And it's, again, it comes back to whether or not someone agrees with every part of our discussion here or not. There should be one thing clear, that we have a system with the power to take children from their parents, and they all must be held to the highest possible standard. And you, my dear, do that every single day as you walk and breathe and speak,
Yeah.
truth to power on earth. So I really
And
appreciate you.
remember, the children are the hostages.
That's it.
There are, on any given minute, 400,000 kids in foster care. If 400,000 Americans were being held hostage in Iran, what do you think we would be doing?
Exactly. What do you think we'd be doing is right. Incredible. Oops, I got rid of you by accident. Didn't mean to do that. Well, Connie, thank you so much for being here today. I certainly appreciate your time, and you are a warrior. Truly
Thank you
a
so
warrior.
much.
We
And keep
look
it up,
forward
and I'm happy to come back anytime. I have so many topics to talk about.
I think we're going to have to put an editorial calendar together with you alone. It'd be
Absolutely.
fantastic. Thank you so
Okay,
much.
thank you.
God bless you. Incredible, right? What you guys heard today should be incredibly, disturbing. It should keep you up at night, because if you're a parent with children, everybody is fair game once the system decides to put their teeth into you. The state claims they have power to decide who your child belongs to. So yeah, every family's at risk. And putting their head in the sand and pretending this only happens to other people, and a whisper, somebody had CPS at the door. We can't do that anymore. We got to be real with the situation. We can't look away because we are uncomfortable with the fact our next door neighbor got a knock, especially when your next door neighbor is a great parent. We can't keep repeating the fact that child protection is something great while ignoring the fact that the children who are being traumatized by these unnecessary separations, and the parents who are denied due process, the attorneys who are punished like Connie for fighting back, like our own Christopher Burns for fighting back, because families are being broken by institutions that really have no accountability to anybody. Remember, these are agencies. You didn't elect them. I didn't elect them. They just showed up. And if you pull up your Constitution, you won't find an agency listed in there. So I want to thank again Representative Rachel Keshel. Her work shows us that legislative reform is possible. Laws can be changed. Procedures can be changed. Agencies can be forced into the light. And Connie Reguli, her story reminds us that fighting this system does come at a cost. When an attorney, an advocate, a parent, or a candidate running in for office, or even like a whistleblower stands up, you've got a big, powerful machine that you're facing. This is the Goliath, and you are the Davids. So remember, there's lots of costs, lots of victims, and lots of slings and arrows, but we stand up and we fight back because truth matters, and it still has a place in the courtroom. It's still about whether or not you as a parent have a fundamental right to raise your children. You don't get treated like cattle. And that's not how God intended. Our founding fathers saw clear to that. They immortalized it into a beautiful piece of parchment 250 years ago. So I hope you guys got a lot out of the show. And if you have further questions, the links to these incredible ladies are in the show notes on Rumble and YouTube. So you can go there and find them. We do stream this also on X, LinkedIn, Facebook as well. So I appreciate everybody tuning in today. I hope you guys have a fantastic rest of your Thursday.